Alright, hello Biology 2, this is Mr. B and we're back for our second flip lesson, and it's going to be a continuation of Chapter 21, Section 1. If you guys remember we were talking about fungi, and the last picture you guys saw, it looked a little bit like this, and we were just talking about some of the different structures. So as a quick review, the first structure that isn't listed here is just hypha, Hypha, and those multiple hypha are going to make up the hyphae. The hyphae make up the mycelium, which again are like the roots, the ones that are going to go out and get the nutrients. And then the one part that we just briefly mentioned as the reproductive structure, it's going to be the fruiting body. So the fruiting body is what's going to be growing above the ground. So we're going to get a little more in detail with that now. So the actual mushroom part of a fungus is known as the fruiting body. So if you guys like mushrooms to eat, you like them on your pizza, things like that, you're actually just eating the fruiting body of a fungus. So the fruiting body is used as a reproductive structure growing from the mycelium in the soil beneath it. So we have the mycelium are kind of like the roots. The fruiting body growing up is going to be the reproductive structure. So how do fungi reproduce? So there's multiple ways that they do that. So we're going to take a look at the first one. Actually, first we're going to decide that there actually are two ways. There's both asexually and sexually. If you guys remember, again, hopefully those are both review terms. Asexually means they reproduce on their own. It's almost just like making a clone of themselves. And reproducing sexually is when they actually come into contact with another fungus, where it actually requires two separate organisms to make a new organism. So how asexual reproduction occurs. The first one is when the hyphae just break off and begin to grow on their own. So that's just one type. That one fungus kind of has something happens, maybe just something comes in and cuts the hyphae off from the original. They're going to still be fine. They're going to grow and they're going to survive on their own. So that's one way of asexual reproduction. Another way of asexual reproduction involves the production of spores. So we'll get into a little more detail about what exactly spores are in a little bit, but when the fungi produce the spores, they scatter and grow, and then in some fungi, the spores are produced in structures called sporangia. So don't forget that word sporangia, because sporangia are at the tips of specialized hyphae called sporangiophores. So I'm going to try to break this down a little bit so it makes a little more sense, but we're going to go over it again probably in class. So how this is kind of broken down is we have hyphae, and at the end of the hyphae they are sporangiophores. Inside of the sporangiophores there are sporangia, and inside of the sporangia there are spores. So that could get a little confusing, but when you actually see it written out in front of you, it should make a little more sense. So just try to bear with me for now on that. So that is how asexual reproduction will occur. Either hyphae just kind of go off on their own, or the fungi will produce spores. So the next part would be sexual reproduction in fungi. So when we think of funguses, we don't really have male and a female. We have a plus and a minus. So what happens is hyphae growing in the soil, they go out and they're kind of reaching, trying to find nutrients, and let's say they come into contact with the fungus of the same species. So those hyphae will meet, and a plus and a minus will match up together, and they will fuse into one cell. So this one cell, after growth and development, the nuclei form a diploid zygote nucleus. So diploid is what, again, should be a review term, but I'll try to go over it with you again. That means it is a cell that has two sets of chromosomes. So this is like a normal cell. It has two sets of chromosomes. If you remember, like your parents, they pass on each one set from your mom, one set from your dad, things like that. So a diploid zygote nucleus, and a zygote is just a cell that is formed when those plus and minus come together. So diploid has two chromosomes. Zygote is just the term for the cell that is made. And then after that, the zygote enters meiosis, and it produces haploid spores. So a haploid spore is only going to contain one set of chromosomes. So this is one that's ready to kind of meet up with another one and maybe grow and form a new fungus. So these spores are capable, again, of growing into a new fungus. So after they reproduce, they have to spread in some way. So there's been various tactics employed by different types of fungus. So many fungi produce dry spores, and those easily scatter in the wind. So we're going to see some different types of funguses that reproduce in different ways. There's actually one called the puffball that almost shoot their spores up in the air, and then the wind would kind of spread them out all over. Then they grow and they form new funguses. So that's one way. And if these spores are to germinate, they must land in an environment with the proper combination of temperature, moisture, and food so that they can grow. So Spores are very resilient. They're not going to really dry out or burn up or get too wet. They're going to just stay in one almost a dormant state. They're almost like in hibernation, I guess you would say, until they get the right combination of growth patterns, and then they'll grow and produce an actual fungus. So that is another way. So then other funguses are specialized to lure animals, which disperse spores over long distances. So I guess this would be if an animal likes to eat a fruiting body, the fungus will produce that. They sometimes will almost maybe just get stuck on the animal walks, they fall off. Other times the animal will pass them through their digestive system, and that's how they will spread. So that is the end of section 1. Again, come with any questions that you guys might have. I know this is a little bit confusing, but hopefully we'll be able to iron out any problems you have in class. So have a good one, and I'll see you in class.